The first trick is wavetable sampling from an analog gear. To understand this trick, we will start with my Moog Sub37. So the main idea here is the only oscillator one is active. Open up the cutoff filter all the way up and using just a 6 dB filter so it's not affecting the sound in a way. And we are just using full sustain sound. I like to take something from the lower C. The main reason for that I can capture more harmonics on the wavetable by using the lower octaves, I would say. The only thing that we are going to do, this. And that's all we need for now. Once you record the sound, you will get something like this. You can definitely see all these sawtooths here. I'm gonna make it slightly longer than half a bar. The main idea is grabbing it from the zero crossing. Something like this. I'm gonna click Ctrl J. Now we have this. We're gonna right click the sample and show in Explorer so that we can drop it in here. You have to actually consolidate one more time, otherwise Ableton locks the file so you cannot drop into the Serum. At this part you have a couple of different options. Let me show you. You can, for example, pick one of the options here. It tries to figure out the frames depending on your pitch. If your pitch is changing, it's better to get a dynamic pitch follow, or if it is like a constant pitch, you can pick a zero snap or frame size pitch average. Something like this would work. But the problem here is when you are working with analog synthesizer, let me go all the way up, you see that it starts to drift a little bit from the beginning. And if we go more and further, you will see that it drifts more and more and more. It is not necessarily something bad, it's how analog oscillators oftentimes behave. So first, I'm gonna show you how you can fix this one. What I tend to do oftentimes, write this manually. If I write 337 and import it one more time, you can see that it's slowed down a little bit, so at the end there is a less drift. So you may need to manually adjust this one. Suggest you just delete everything here and remove multi-selection, and then you are left with the 20. You can try to shift horizontal zero crossing, but it takes an average, so it doesn't solve the problem. Still at the end you still have a slight pitch drift. The best way here is actually doing it one by one. You click the single and then shift the horizontal zero crossing. It does not change the waveform, it's just snapping to the zero crossing. So basically here is 0 and here is the second 0, and you have to do it for all. Once you have done this, because we are working with analog gear, it may come with DC offsets, so remove DC offsets. You see that it smoothes slightly, and then finally you can go and morph spectral, so it will be much smoother, change from this wave to this wave like this. And now you will see that we have again back to 256 waves, and if I go out now and take a look, you see that this is really nice smooth wavetable. And this will kind of sound in between. It will still have this imperfections, and it's also a little bit slightly driven as well. Sounds like this. And if you compare to the regular sawtooth, you can definitely hear that this oscillator is darker, a bit also saturated at the meantime. And if you want to make it even more interesting, you can take an LFO like this and put it into wavetable position, put it into half bar. Actually, it's better to do kind of like this. So you can definitely hear these imperfections in between. And this is what makes analog gear slightly different than digital gear, these imperfections. This type of resampling is really good for bass, sub-bass, where you want to pitch really stable. But you can actually use that pitch drift for your favor. So what I'm going to do again, follow the same steps and put it here. Now we have back again our sawtooth, and here we have all the 128 wavetable, so I'm not gonna do too much, but I'm gonna still remove this offset. And if you like you can still go for a more spectral. And if we go back here, let it put tuner and see how the pitch is slightly changing. But I want to show you one more thing. Let's go back to the Moog first. Now comes the fun part. If you want to even capture the filter behavior of Sub37 and use it in Serum, there are a couple of different tricks. And the one that I really like is actually creating kind of a plucky sound, because in electronic dance music, many of the sounds is actually that plucky sound. Bring the cutoff down, create a plucky envelope, get a more aggressive filter, give a bit release. If you want to, you can even give a bit sub to that actually. Can give even a bit feedback. I think this is good. Now we're going to capture this sound. Avoid the same steps. I did the same thing, right? Putting the wavetable here. And actually resampled one more time because I decided to have a longer tail. And if you take oscillator B, take off the filter and all the effects. You can see again that slight pitch drift. What is happening here is actually we were just closing the cutoff filter, right? The sound gets dark. And now the fun part begins, what you can do with this type of sounds. What I took, for example, use the same wavetable, right? And then added a unison on top of that. And these are like 1 octave different from each other. So look at this. It's just beautiful. And then you add a filter slightly. Super slight movement. And then of course you are adding the extra effects. And look how beautiful it sounds in the end. All these unlock juiciness together with this modern synth sound. I will never be able to get this sound from my Sub37, but I will never get this sound in Serum without my Sub37. So you see how they actually can complete each other. I know a lot of people are like, give me that preset now. I will share it on the comments below or the description below. You can download it free. And this was the first tip, so I have 4 more to go. This tip is for the people who receive comments like their tracks are sounding a bit robotic or a bit repetitive. And this is called velocity mapping. So the idea is quite simple. You take the velocity and you can actually assign it to many different parameters to emulate exactly how you actually play a real instrument. I prepared a simple loop. Really cool small loop. I actually have full tutorial of this track in my other channel. I will add something here so that you can take a look if you like to. The main problem here is that if you take a look at one more time to the main synth, again, I'm using my analog wavetables that I'm creating at the moment. While it's a really cool sound, it's a bit too repetitive and it's a bit too robotic. So what I'm going to do, duplicate this one so that we can do an A/B test in the end and turn this off and go back to here. So the main idea is you can actually emphasize a feeling or emphasize a certain notes with the velocity in your track. So I already actually played a little bit to make the velocities a bit more relevant. So what is happening here, like you say, when we go up, we open up a bit the velocities or using higher velocities, and then some here and there, the notes that I want to emphasize have higher velocities and the other ones a bit lower velocities. So what this may have, the obvious choice here will be that most of the synths actually comes with that. You take a velocity like this, let's make it a bit more dramatic like this, and if you assign it, for example, to your levels, I can make it even more dramatic. When velocity up, the volume is higher, velocity down, the volume is lower. It kind of emulates how hard you hit the string with your pick. If you hit harder, you will have a higher volume. If you hit a bit less velocity, then you will have the lower volume. It's simply the same idea here. But because we are in the synthesizer and digital world, our options are endless. What I'm thinking, like for example, when we hit harder, we should have much more openness, brighter sound. What does that mean? I can take this velocity, put it in the cutoff. Let's take that volume off so that it's more stable here. Cool. It is not the end. What I like to do, for example, I can take this velocity, put it into detune. So when I hit higher pitch notes, then I can get the sound a bit more detuned. The other thing, very common thing, you take the velocity this time, we're going to put on the decay time, but we're going to do it the other way around. When I had the lower notes, I want to sustain a bit longer because they are deeper. So what I'm going to do, put it this and put it on the other way around. So open this up a little bit more. So when the velocity high, it will be shorter decay. Which means that higher notes are louder but shorter, so that they don't take over the track. Things are endless here. For example, you can pan a little bit right and left when the higher velocity comes, like this. For this one, I'm going to make it more stable. The other really cool thing is actually you can take this put it onto distortion. Let's say I want more distortion when I'm doing the high velocities. And the other cool thing is, for example, the delays. You make something like super short, like a slap delay style, put a ping pong, and then you take this velocity, put it onto mix. So when the high notes hit, or in this case, the high velocity notes hits, you want to have the delay. And then you want the delay disappear right afterwards. You don't even understand there is a delay in it, but it's so mashed up together with the sound. It's so kind of organically linked. That's the reason that is really cool. So let's do an A/B test and see the difference. Let me quickly play a bit around and make it even more aggressive. Sounds like this. And now take a look what happens when I play with the track. There is really a huge difference with the feeling or the organicness of the track. Again, I exaggerate a little bit, you don't need to make it this obvious, but using velocity mapping really can help you to make your track much more organic and human-like if you use it right. Which brings us to the next tip. This tip is about extreme pitching of percussive sounds. I will start with the simplest example, tuning a percussion sample to get a rumble. Cool loop, but obviously needs a rumble to complement the kick. What I'm going to do, go to my Berlin bundle, and from there we get a clap. Let's get this clap sound here. Trick I often do is just get a utility and mono the sound, because we are making a rumble. We don't need, of course, a stereo sound. And then we're gonna get EQ. The main idea here is I'm more interested in deeper harmonics. So I'm gonna cut all the highs off. So when I tune, I can hear what I'm gonna get. Turn it down. Look at this. This is actually perfect. Let's get a compressor and sidechain to kick and see how it all together sounds. This is actually a pretty good sound. Let's listen together with the kick. I think that is the fastest rumble that I ever made in my entire life. Make it even cooler, you can use maybe kind of a channel EQ. Here we go. Volume down a bit. Let me show you another super cool example. So I have a loop like this. Obviously it needs kind of a rimmy snare sound. What you need to do, first you need to find the closed hat sample. It has to be very short. So we go to closed hats and then this one. This is perfect. And if you play, tune it all the way down. Now at the beginning of the sound, do you hear this tonal sound, like ding sound right here? That's exactly what we are going to get here. So I'm gonna go here. I think it comes somewhere in here. Yep. And I'm gonna turn the snap off and then give a fade out. I'm sure you heard this sound a billion times. This is how you make it. There's two more tricks that you have to do to make the sound even a bit more cooler, I would say. This type of sound is supposed to be very snappy. You get a compressor, bring the ratio quite a bit high, and then you want to have a slow attack, so you let the initial pass and then duck the rest. Right now. And then of course you can get an EQ just to cut super lows, because we tune this down all the way. There should be a bit artifacts here. And maybe a slight boost. Bring the volume down. send it to the reverb a little bit. And other very common technique is actually using a kick samples to get these tonal percussions. I think this one is cool. Now you have to tune it so that it passes to the track. Let's make it like really dark. I already have some big hole, dark holes here. And we did a bit playing around. It's beautiful, and the energy that we put into this was just like 3 minutes, that's all. But this brings us to the next step. So when you use LFO, the shape will be always the same. In most of the synthesizers, you cannot change the shape of the LFO. So even though if you play faster or slower, it will be always that triangle shape, or it will be always that square shape. But when you loop the envelopes, you have the full control on the modulation curve, which in turn creates really interesting looping sounds rather than this robotic sound that you would get in LFO. The common approach is like you have a sound like this, and then you apply LFO to your cutoff filter and get this really very fast repeating sound. And at this point, you play with LFO rate to get LFO modulated sound. The second way to do this, let me turn off the LFO here so we get back to the original sound. We can create first a nice plucky sound. It's warm, it's cool, it's ready to use. First we're going to turn on the loop, and then we're going to increase the sustain all the way up for the amplitude envelope. So when I click this, and this is where the fun begins, because everything that you play around will affect how fast the repeat, the loop is. So this will really create the organic sounding LFO style sound. So take a look. And this example is about cutting through the mix without adding additional layer. This is also a simple trick, but not many people actually utilize it, but it's very, very useful. So we have this loop over here. The problem here is it's a bit stale, it's a bit like static, it doesn't really cut through the mix. And if we solo the sound, it needs this kind of a really fast, attacky sound at the beginning. If you play with the envelopes, it will change the character of the sound too much and it will not sound as good. But what we can do, take the envelope tree and create a really, really short decay time. So I'm talking about like creating something like 50 milliseconds or something like. It has to be very fast. The most common approach actually used a lot in the mainstream EDM tracks is taking this one and putting into the pitch so that you had this very fast pitch envelope in the beginning like this. This is very good and useful and kind of creates this initial percussive sound, but it's, for example, for this type of tracks doesn't work that much. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take this off. First, we're gonna bring the alpha noise, but we're gonna put that envelope under the noise. So we will have this very fast noise sound on top. Let me solve this. This is the first kind of layer on top of that, but there are even better options. So what I'm going to do, rather than using tube, I'm gonna go for diode. You see how much it distorts the sound, but all the time. No, we don't need it all the time. Again, we are going to take our envelope, put it first to drive. So this will be like very fast drive in the beginning. And then we're going to put the same envelope to the mix. So we want to have this distortion sound right in the beginning of the mix. It's like kind of really fat sound in the beginning, to be honest. And finally, what I like to oftentimes do as well is just taking an EQ, bring it to the mid area, and you see if I make it like this, increase the gain, it gives a boost on the high end or the mid highs. But the idea is same, we don't need all the time, we just need the initial plucky sound here. This is just an example. Actually, you can use this very creatively as well. You can use maybe a chorus to make the beginning of the sound soft instead of hard. There are really different approaches to this, very fast transients, but take a look at the difference that it made to the original sound. Of course, I'm exaggerating a bit so that you can hear it a bit easier, but it's just chop chop, very snappy, and in the track it will pop really because of that. Take a look at the difference between the original sound and this one. Even though the new sound, the ones that we made the transient is kind of, let's say 3 dB less loud than the other one, we can still hear it cleaner and better. That really helps you to clean up your mix, like making this type of sounds a bit more transient and cutting off the tails so that other things come here that and make the sound much more interesting. For example, here, because it's less louder, we can hear the other arpeggio sound better. Do you hear the difference? Because the tails are less loud, now we suddenly start to hear those like nice arpeggio sound in the background and appreciate that sound more.